toolbar there and click on chat, and then this column shows up along the along your screen, and you can type in a question there if you have one. I do want to thank Malvern Books, and I want to say to all of you, buy a book. My book is available, signed copies are available at Malvern. More important than buying one of my books is supporting independent bookstores. That's always important, but it's crucially important now that we keep them viable, keep them open. I have been, every time I want a book, I've been trying to order it through Malvern, through Bookworks here in Albuquerque or some other bookstore. Okay, so what I wanted to say first is that I want to show you the cover, and I can do share screen, so I'm going to put that up and talk about that for a minute. My book is called Anyone's Son, published by Three House Press. Andrea Watson is the publisher there, and just by sheer magic and coincidence, she was in our house last October and saw that piece of art, which Scott did, on one of the walls here. It's incredible because he did it on translucent paper, dots on both sides. So the two men embracing are on one side, the lizards and the lilies are on the other. And I did high resolution scans and sent them to Andrea, and she sent them to her designer, who managed to work this magic so that both parts of it would show up appropriately on the cover of the book. I just couldn't be happier with the cover. Anyone's Son. There we go with that. And I'll do stop share and we go back to me. I'm going to start with a poem that's set on the family farm. I would not call my book of poems a memoir, but it is roughly autobiographical. Many of the poems are based on personal experience. So I wanted to show you a couple of things here. Here's one. So when I think about myself and when I think about the poems in this book, I think of two things. One is the Meischen family farm. My father lived there from the time he was 5 until he died in 2015. Nobody lives in one place that long anymore. It was a hugely shaping experience for me, the family and the farm. And the other thing that threads its way through is what I take to be a fact, that I was born gay, and it took me a while. I was in my mid-40s when I came to terms with that. But I'm going to start with a poem that's set on the farm and that weaves those two elements into the poem. It's called Farm Outhouse with Mail Order Catalog, 1957. And before Scott's going to be mad at me because I talk too much, I want you to listen closely and tell me what you notice about this poem when I'm done. As you turn to the pages of the beautiful men, your fingertips tremble beneath a sliver of sun. You love being alone here where no one can see the beautiful torsos, the beautiful briefs where your fingertips hover. Light slivers the gloom, sun splashes through peaks made by nails on the beautiful torsos, the beautiful briefs. White against sunlight, white against shadow. Apertures dazzling, the gloom sun splashed. On the earth beneath you, the scarabs are working, black against sunlight, black against shadow, rolling their burdens beyond like little sun gods. The scarabs keep working on the dung beneath you, shaping little dark suns that will feed them tomorrow. These little sun gods back away from their burdens as your fingers return to the underclothed men, shaping bright little suns that will feed you tomorrow, though your hunger shimmers like motes in this light. Your fingertips linger with the underclothed men, while in the corner in shadow, a black widow weaves. Your hunger shimmers like motes in this light, where no one can see you, alive and alone. In the corner in shadow, a black widow weaves as you turn through the pages of beautiful men. And what I'll say very quickly there is, since that Joe muted everyone, I'm just hoping you listened and you noticed repetitions. If you don't know the form, that poem is called a pantoum. A pantoum is written in 4-line stanzas. Every stanza repeats 2 lines from the stanza before and has 2 new lines. And it strikes me, there are 6 of them in this book, it strikes me as particularly useful for a poem that wants to just meditate, that wants to remember, like this poem wants to remember. I think it also works for obsession, and there are 2 or 3 of those, but they're a little bit maybe R-rated. So I'm not going to read one of those this evening. Okay, next, I'm going to read a poem from pages later, based on an experience from Halloween, the night of Halloween, 1969. This poem is called How Close We Come to Unforgiving Surfaces, and I apologize before I read it. The lyrics, many of you, if you're old enough, will recognize from the Beatles, even if I don't sing them very well. How close we come to unforgiving surfaces. High beams, a country roadbed curving under moonlight, the afterburn of bourbon. Your lungs are drunk on oxygen, syllables of laughter tumbling out of you, out of him at the wheel. Out the open window, stones skipping over water, the old Dodge skimming airborne, the lift, the promise. Come together right now over me. Moonlight, crickets rub wing against wing. Dashboard, windshield, high beams. The roadbed rushes over the rise, city asleep below, a curbed divider suddenly dead ahead. He yanks at the wheel, yanks again. The Dodge front axle wheelbase driver's side whumps against the curb, and you catapult, terror lifting you, an endless, weightless winging, no breath to measure rapture, until gravity remembers itself, remembers you, drops you in a heap where the visor tilts into the windshield, the Dodge flipped over, high beams glaring into dust. Beyond the sudden stillness among the scrub, cricket wings again. I'm here, I'm here, against a voice deep inside you. Your father like carved stone. A fool and his piper, he says, your payment is coming. Does he know where your eyes go when you look at the driver? How far you would follow? You crawl out the open window, stand into delicious night, a flutter in the bar ditch as a pages tossed out a window. Yesterday's Time magazine, the banner head that caught your eye, the homosexual in America, face on the cover like a color negative, skin tones in neon pink, a face that might have been anyone's son, at cheekbones and hairline, a tumble of molecules, the breeze like a feather. Without a scratch, you hear your mother turning from the phone. She will make of the ruined Dodge something safe, no payment exacted. The piper you've danced to, playing on without fee. A scratch. Your father poisons her words. Our boy's got marks on him. Behind you from the car, a voice, your driver's voice, his words off key. He say 1 and 1 is 3. Got to be good looking, 'cause he's so hard to see. Overhead, a rustling and the shadow of an owl, thick-bodied, wings spread, mouse singing his death song. So that's the poem. And what I want to do is I want to show you something. Here it is. When I was working on this poem, my memory of the party, the drive, the curb divider, everything was very vivid. There was no magazine in the bar ditch. But as I was working on the poem, I thought I remembered that there was a Time magazine article about then. Turns out it was the cover story. Turns out it was dated October 31st, 1969, it was probably November 1st by the time the car overturned. And I went looking for it, and I find it fascinating that it's a photograph, but the distortions are very interesting. The distortions in the color, especially the fact that the face is mostly pink. And so I thought this photograph, this image, this magazine has to be in the poem. It seemed to invite itself in. Okay. Something else I wanted to say that I think we see in that poem, over and over again, I've thought this all my life, and the poems kept coming back to it, the role of luck. I could have been maimed or killed, either or both of us, and we crawled out of that car without a mark on us. There are other poems that deal with that issue, the role of luck and how some people don't have it. Next, I want to go to and I'm going to show you a couple of photographs if I can get to those. I'm going to read a poem about a trip to Munich when I was 24 years old. And that's a photograph of me with way more hair and my aviator sunglasses standing beside my best friend of 50 years. And I just wanted to show that. Before I read the poem. And the poem is called Self-Portrait, Age 24. And you'll follow me to Munich. I'm talking about someone named he. When I wrote this, I was seeing myself as if I were a character, as if it weren't me, so it doesn't say I, but it's David Meischen. Kennedy International was hypnotic with light, escalator and turn and corridor and turn, drawing him toward airbridge, momentum, lift. A pause on the tarmac at Reykjavik. Soon, he whispered, soon. Overnight rail from Luxembourg, morning in Munich, tiled subway surfaces hammering all the syllables of German. Muted when the doors of his car slid shut and he rode to the stop at Odeonsplatz. He walked the city, first snow in the English gardens, the geese, the pond, the little Greek temple on its hill beneath a perfect burnished sky. And after, to the walk up on Heimhauser Strasse. At the table by the window, much talking. The words for what he wanted sealed inside. The way his body felt when the man he'd come here to see looked at him, smiled. The words continued after sundown, often a glass raised between them. One night, carousing, he tweaked a shiny bronze nose, much fingered by tourists and drunks. Stood laughing where a stone boy stood pissing in a fountain. The hand on his shoulder, a fever he tried to memorize. Always again back to the walk-up. So little space between him and the man who smiled, who gave no other sign. They had come to an edge, life beyond where two bodies might divest themselves of clothing and merge. That life was squared off, a cartographer's dream of what can be known, with scaled creatures at the border, flame-tongued, to turn a tempted traveler back. A week more, another. He packed his duffel, reversed himself, night train from Munich, Icelandic Airlines ticket home. Rising up out of Reykjavik, the jet began to shake, circle, shaking as if to free itself of rivets, turned back. On the runway, when the plane came down, everywhere, fire trucks, foam trucks, ambulances crying out against stillness, headlights and blue lights and red lights coming for him. He would have traded his ticket. A rowboat would have served. Anything but the shaking he'd been through, any place safe. I will tell you, I don't think I've ever been so terrified or so near death. They flew that plane over the Atlantic circling until they could dump enough fuel that there would be less danger of fire when we landed. And I kept telling myself I was okay until I looked out the window and saw the foam trucks and fire trucks and ambulances. And then I really would have traded my ticket for a canoe. Okay. The next poem is called That These Stones Be Made Bread. And before I read it, I love titles and I love biblical quotes. If you know your Bible, your New Testament, that's from Matthew chapter 4, verse 3, when Satan was tempting Jesus, and the line reads, "And when the tempter came to him, he said, 'If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread.'" And you'll see how the poem is about temptation. Let me get to the right page. And it starts with an epigraph, something I heard often growing up. Use your head for something besides to keep your ears apart. And that's attributed to Elwood Meischen in conversation with his firstborn son. That would be me, summer 1966. I pray for daydreams blank as the sky above us. I pray my head be emptied, hollowed out. If only fear could make it so. Flames the priest promises when I tell what brims my waking. Flame does not stop me. Judgment does not stop me. Your eyes on me, Daddy, as if you know. God knows what fills my head. God knows these graven images that claim me. Dreams that whisper earthly promise. My hands at a belt buckle, a zipper tab, fingers itching for the fever beneath. I have followed your advice, Daddy. My head is full to bursting. The next poem is a memory that goes back to the late 50s. The Rifle Club Hall, it was one of those octagonal German dance halls in Orange Grove, Texas. And this poem is just called Rod and the Western Airs. Satin shirts, fancy stitching at the yoke, silky fringe along the cuffs, dapper cowboy slacks, a pleat above each ankle, flashy boots tap with the drummer's beat, hems dance in sync like twirler skirts. Front and center, Rod. Cheeks, chin, jawline, sideburns, hair like raven feathers. This man is at the mic. He is singing to the mic, lips touching the mic. I look and look, fingered strings and keyboard moving in me, snare drum pulsing in my tapping foot. Too young to know I am in love with more than the music. Too young to know what it means, this endless moment watching a man sing. Years from the impulse that will move me from looking at a man to reaching for him. Years from understanding that free as I feel, mouthing the words with a man at the mic, there is no place for me in the song, no place for me in this dance hall, no place for me in the story spun out by the words I am learning by heart. The next one I feel connects to the feelings of that boy watching a man sing and wanting to be a part of that world. This is another pantoum. It's called Male and Female, He Made Them. On a table in shade, 6 candles, a lawn that shimmered with slivers of sun. We played pin the tail, played ring around the rosy, my knees stained green, where I fell when she chased me through slivers of sun. The afternoon in shimmers, we skipped rope face to face, a humming blur around us, the grass a smudge of green. I chased her, we fell. Older now, a matched pair, laughter breaking free of our humming blur, we rise, still face to face, and dance, coupled, one double X and one XY, among matched pairs, younger, older, our laughter spilling. Dancers, we circle, our carousel spins. These couples are coupled the same, double X, XY. Male and female, female and male, our world made thus. A spinning carousel and we its moving parts. Dancers, a circle. The choice for me is fixed, woman or woman or woman. Though I was made otherwise, paired with a woman, eyeing men. Not one of them, not one can take my hand. Our choice is fixed, man and woman, woman and man. Mother with father, husband with wife, I too will say I do. No man for me, I take a woman by the hand. I father sons, I yearn for XY paired with XY. Husband with husband, a dream of saying I do. This boy chased by a girl so many years ago, who yearns for man with man. He fathered sons. His boys play backyard party games. The children chase each other, boys and girls at random. A birthday cake awaits them, candles for the celebrants. The next poem seems to agree with that one, to go along with some of those sentiments. It's purely imagined, but I want to read it. This is called Apple of Eden, Apple of Glass. I would say that time has stopped, except that pages yellow and dust sifts. Bookshelves are my world now. I do not mind the loss, but what it feels like to have a heart, I remember that feeling. At the core of me, seeds lodged there and sweetness born of them. My crisp, delicious flesh. The hunger I wanted to feed when fingers plucked me from the tree that fed me. I wanted the cowboy, his spurs, their shivery jingle, almost inaudible as he rode each morning through the orchard. I wanted him to reach for me, to drop me in the pocket his heart beat beneath. I wanted the song his spurs were made to sing. I turned molten waiting, lost seeds and core and flesh and skin to clearest glass. I am heavy now and smooth. I shine. Nearby are spurs attached to bookends. No one jingles them. They do not sing to me. I have no heart to call them. Before I wrote that poem, I was looking at a bookshelf in my home in Austin, and there was a beautiful glass apple there given to me by my friend Patrice McKinney, who's listening somewhere tonight. We can't see her, but I know she's there. And beside that glass apple were bookends with spurs attached to them. And that's how that poem came to be. Just thought I'd tell you that. So I'm going to read one more poem, then the Q&A. I see some questions there. And after the Q&A, I've got a poem that I'd like to read to close off if we feel like we have time. This one is from much later. I don't need to explain. It's called He Wanted Something Else. This intimate, this familiar space, snug as the back of a pickup truck, creekside, moonlit. This bed is why for 20 years he never came here. This bed signified what my father knew was done here. A door closing behind two men, one of them his son, two men together here. Just room enough for me and the man I love in this bed. These trespasses my father imagined. Two men touching, skin against skin. Warmth of blood pulsing beneath. Warmth of our bodies, each against the other. Warmth of one merging into warmth of the other, surrendering to sleep. Two men, one. I thank you for listening. And we're supposed to have, oh, this is cool. There are lots of questions. Why does so much of your work focus on the distant past, your childhood and boyhood? I've been telling stories, I think, since I first spoke. I'm told that I discovered words when I was 18 months old. And I know Sharon Arnold, who's known me since I was 6, could testify I haven't stopped since. The farm had its grip on me. Relatives, family, playground. And I think that first poem I read, I think I knew when I was sitting in the outhouse and I was drawn to the men's underwear pages in mail order catalogs, I knew that that was weird. I think I was aware that my brothers weren't doing that. And I know I was aware that I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, even though no one told me about these things. So I think that's part of the reason the stories stick. I think even though I resisted, I was trying to figure out, who is this David Meischen? And what does this life mean and this family? Enough said there. You really flipped an old Dodge. It turns out it was a Plymouth, but by the time I asked my friend Carl, the poem had been published and I liked the Dodge. We had had way, way, way too much to drink. My friend Carl, who died suddenly, by the way, the day before Thanksgiving, his wife went to a doctor's appointment, and when she came home, he was gone. He had died suddenly. He was a carefree inebriate, and I was a cautious one. I wanted to drive, and he thought, why? It was his car, he was going to drive. And yes, he flipped the car. He was so completely drunk that when we crawled out of it, he was convinced that if we just pushed hard enough, we could turn it over and drive back to Austin, and his dad would never find out. But that happened, and we were without a scratch. Seatbelts. I've written about this in my memoir. I don't remember if there were seatbelts in that car. If there were, nobody used them. I started using seatbelts in 1982 when my cousin Gary, who would have walked away from this wreck had he been wearing a seatbelt, fell asleep at the wheel, sideswiped a freeway divider, and his head was split open when he hit the divider between the windshield and the driver's door. That's when I started on seatbelts. So, will you talk about the title? I like to go through and read my poems and pick titles out of them. The title I picked out of the same poem, the title I picked was A Fool and His Piper. Scott hated it, and the publisher wasn't fond of it. And she saw in the same poem, it's a description of that magazine cover where I talk about the weird colors, but then I say it's a face that could have been anyone's son. Andrea liked that, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, as unique as my story is, I do feel that I could have been anyone's son. One of the testimonials I love, two of my close friends here in Albuquerque, straight men, have written me to say that they identified with the adolescent anguish of the poems I wrote, that they were straight. But like one of these friends said that he sat in the outhouse looking at the women's underwear pages in the mail order catalogs and obsessing. So it's that, and the more I read from it and the more I look at it, the happier I am that that's what we came up with. How do you differentiate between autobiographical poetry and memoir? Oh, and that's from Scott, and he says David's middle name, by the way, is Elwood. Yes, I am my father's firstborn son. My middle name is his first, and this is a little bit off, but when I looked at the video of my Albuquerque launch, over and over and over, I could see my father in my facial expressions, my father in the way my mouth moves, my father in the way my tongue gets to my teeth when I'm pronouncing words like T and D. It just amazes me. Differentiate. Okay, the poem about turning the car over is very much in the moment of what I remember. But that magazine wasn't there. It invited itself into that poem. At the end of the poem, I was feeling like something ominous was going on. So I have an owl flying by overhead with a mouse in its claws. What happened in real life is that we walked to something like a 7-Eleven, called the police, went back to the car, and though we weren't smokers, smoked like crazy, hoping that the cops wouldn't notice. Of course they did, but it was 1969 Halloween. They put us in their car and drove us back to where we lived and didn't say a word about drink. Those were the days. Let's see. So some of these poems, when I sat down, I thought I have to capture exactly what I remember. And others, I let the poem just kind of go where it wanted to, because I didn't feel that I was writing strict autobiography. There's even a poem called Dreaming Orion. The character's made up. And he's living in Lorain in West Texas. And the reason I wrote the poem is my friend Patrice, who's listening tonight, grew up in Lorain, and I love her dearly. And I was just imagining this kid, kind of like me, growing up where she grew up. Okay. For the moments you choose to write about things you've dwelled on over the years, are the moments you choose to write about things you've dwelled on over the years, or do they come as sudden insights? Probably both. I do go back to things that I have obsessed on over the years, and sometimes those turn into pantoums. But sometimes a poem a moment suggests itself. in the way that magazine cover just invited itself into the poem. That was fairly sudden. When was the first time you ever danced with a man, and how was it? Oh my goodness. In 1994, in the spring, I had let myself stray. I had given myself permission. I was having an affair. And I walked with this man who was 30 and I was in my mid 40s. I walked into the Rainbow Cattle Company, not the Rainbow Cattle Company, Fifth Street Station. It's been torn down. It's where the convention center is in Austin now. I walked into a country music gay bar and looked at men dancing, and I have to admit, I was outraged. I thought, men can't dance with men. What are they doing? About a year later, a man that I knew very well, a gay man that I knew very well who loved to dance, he and I started going to, first of all, the Fifth Street Station, and when they closed that, the Rainbow Cattle Company, dancing. I even remember going up to a man who was an incredibly good dancer and saying to him in between at some point, I'm not making a pass at you, please come ask me to dance and lead because I don't know how to follow. I was afraid I had this line ready. I thought if some man comes up to dance with me and he wants to lead, I was going to say, I was straight before this. I don't know how to follow, but I did learn. So it was the Fifth Street Station, Austin, Texas, in my mid 40s. And after the outrage, I learned to love it. Let's see. When you write a poem from a memory, what's the first inspiration, the emotion or the sensory details? Goodness, it would depend on the poem, really. I have a poem about, it's an odd thing for it to describe. I have a poem that's pretty much entirely set in one of the restrooms at Seal Hall, the dorm I first lived in Kingsville, Texas. And the writing prompt was to write about a bathroom that you remember. I just started off because I lived there for 2 years and it was a very strange, unair-conditioned place. Started off trying to remember like the mirrors and the 4 commodes lined up along the wall and where was the shower, etc. Depends a lot on the poem. Okay. So much gorgeous imagery. Who are some of the poets whose work inspires or informs you? My reading habits have been erratic all my life. I loved fiction, still do. Poetry, the first poet that I read seriously on my own without that poet being assigned was Sylvia Plath, an amazing poet. The writing itself, the poems are not like hers, but Sylvia Plath was a confessional poet. Much of what she wrote grew out of her own pain, her own trauma, her own autobiography. So I guess I shared that with her. Some of the poems I read by Rilke when I was taking German classes at UT. Good heavens, most recently I read a book of poems by Bruce Snyder called Fruit. Highly recommend them. And it's the imagery, it's the details that just nail you into an experience. Sharon wrote this on here, and I want to read it. David's daddy was a good man, much loved, and she knew all these people, much loved and respected by those who knew him his whole life. There is much to admire in David's reflection of him, but David is himself, and that's your David. I didn't have time to say this. My father, in the 18 years Scott and I owned that house, never set foot in it, but he and I figured out how to bridge that, how to have a relationship. My father loved me. He worked himself into a corner he couldn't get out of and wouldn't get out of. And my mother, who could have straightened him out, had died, and his mother, who could have straightened him out, had died. And so there was no one left to try to talk him out of that. But Sharon's right, a good man. Complicated, but all of us are complicated. Okay. If it's okay with y'all, I think I've kind of scrolled through and seen most of the questions, and it's coming up on 7. Joe, I'm going to assume it's okay for me to read a poem that closes us out, unless you come on and stop me. I said earlier, and Sharon knows this to be the case, that sometimes a car overturns and a terrible thing happens. I had a cousin 4 months older who was the badass of Orange Grove, Texas, really the badass of South Texas. And Gary Meischen only made it to 33. I have outlived him by almost 30, well, I have. I've outlived him by 38 years. So I want to close with a poem that's about him and about the other side of those moments that could be fatal. This one was. And I thank Hank Williams for the title. The title is Nobody's Sugar Daddy Now. And this is the poem. The radio was playing Hank Williams when they found him, steam hissing from the engine like dance hall smoke beneath the freeway lights. He got his first car at 16, took to driving west from town 100 miles an hour across coastal flatland straight into summer's 5 o'clock sun, tires skimming beneath him, a shimmer of watery silver, his laughter buffeted by hot wind whipping through open windows as field hands turned from the harvest to shake their heads. Got pummeled by a jealous rival once, skull bones split beneath the left eye. Laughed when the doctor said, stay on your back, give the bruising time to ebb, let the skull bones mesh again or risk blindness. Sneaked out for a drink instead, shot a game of pool when the ache beating beneath narcotic numbness gave way to nicotine's husky promise, bourbon's buttery warmth. Didn't imagine he'd make it to 40, riding a trajectory that felt predetermined, from his grandfather's razored wrists to the burst of blood inside his own father's head. Final as a kiss of skull bones against car frame. Indifferent as the old oak tree biding its time along a farm road north of San Antonio. And years later, his own son asleep at the wheel, unseatbelted like his father. Like his father, perhaps dreaming something gentler than the brunt of bumper against hardwood. The instant of flight, the sudden darkening. That is how I will close out. Joe, if you will maybe unmute everyone. Y'all can applaud if you want to.
Nicely done, David. Nicely done.
And Joe, if you want to, you're on mute, but if you want to say something, things. Oh, someone named Jen says, David, you were the best creative writing teacher. I learned so much. I love teaching creative writing.
Well, thank you so much, David. This was a really, really terrific reading and experience. I hope people can hear me. Yeah, it looks like I'm bouncing up and down.
You're not muted. We can hear you.
Okay, good. This was a great reading. Thank you for doing it with Malvern Books, and I look forward to experiencing the book some more after your talk and reading. It was wonderful. If anybody has any other questions, wants to chat, say hi to David, feel free. We're here. I'm not going to.
And if you're in town, you can come by and pick up the book at Malvern Books.
Yeah.
And I didn't say this, but I'm sure it's the case. If most bookstores right now you can order from and they'll ship to you. Is that true at Malvern?
We have we're hooked up with bookshop.org. So if you go to the Malvern Books website, it'll take you on a link to Bookshop, and you could order it there. And
I
it'll get
forgot
sent to you
about
there.
David's thing.
Who
I'm
did?
sorry?
They're still talking a little.
Come next time.
I think they're wrapping up.
Yeah, it is wrapping up. So yes, I've been doing that with a local bookstore, and Malvern. Well, everything at Malvern is wonderful, but during the period when I could still travel to Texas, I cannot tell you how often I went in there, and I would just tell the person at the counter, "This is the most recent poetry book I loved," and they would go pull 3 amazing or more amazing books of poetry off the shelf, and I'd walk out of there with those. What they know about books is phenomenal. So get yourself some books. And thank you,
Thank you,
very
David.
much again for being with us this evening.
It was great.
Thank you, David. That was awesome.
Thank you, Liza.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Hi, Cindy.
So I'm gonna sign us off. Bye bye. Thank you, David.
Bye-bye, everyone. I'll just wave until it
Thanks.
disappears.